But hey, there's me. I'm Brian Grant. As was said before, I have expertise of some sort in all things DAX, data modeling, data visualization. If it touches Power BI, I think I'm usually pretty good at it. Plug for myself, I am the creator of the Elements of DAX series, which is a sort of a new way kind of to learn DAX. So if you've been struggling to learn DAX and you like this presentation, you can go ahead and check it out when you're all done. I think there's a lot of good stuff up there, like hours of content. We got a new chapter coming out, either just started coming out or it's going to start coming out next week. So, exciting stuff there. I got lots of experience training people over the world. Actually, I've only been to, other countries a couple times doing it, but it was a lot of fun. So I technically have been around the world training people, and I always really enjoy doing it. It's probably my favorite part of the job. Lots of good stuff, but this kind of training and reaching out to people and showing people how to do stuff that they thought they couldn't do, it really is sort of my absolute favorite. So anyways, that's enough about me. Let's talk about time intelligence. So a big trend in the technology industry is more and more companies are existing in four-dimensional time and space. It's not very good for real estate. You have to pay a lot more for it, but it's really nice to have not 1, 2, 3, but 4 actual dimensions. What do I mean by this? Every company in the world does stuff over time, right? So different companies have different ways of slicing and dicing and measuring things. I'm going to move my picture out of the way because I keep looking at it like it's going to tell me what my next thing to say is. There we go. That's a little better. So every company in the world, they have different ways of slicing and dicing things. Some care about these kinds of categories. Some care about these kind of categories. The one constant throughout pretty much every organization is they care about data over time. So whatever your key metrics are, you're going to have to learn how to show them and display them over time. And the very basic stuff, such as, some per month, some per quarter, some per year, that's fine. But the very next thing that people are going to ask you for is what falls into the category in the bucket of time intelligence formulas or time intelligence patterns. These are things like year-to-date calculations, year-over-year calculations, quarter-over-quarter calculations, rolling 52-week. These are things that you can't simply do by dragging a slicer onto a page, right? Now you could, tell your boss or whoever you're building the report for, you've got a calculator, just hit the slicer, write down the number, hit the slicer again, write down that number, and then use the calculator to divide one by the other. That tends not to fly very well. What you want to do is you want to use some fancy, not even that fancy, sort of intermediate DAX to have DAX do these calculations for you and make them nice and dynamic, okay? So doesn't matter where you work, you're going to have to do this stuff pretty quickly. Now, there's some good news and there's some bad news. The good news is Power BI, and the DAX language in general, offers some canned time intelligence. Some nice, easy formulas that you could just use in conjunction with a date table, and they will do all of the hard work for you, right? Now, these are nice. Like, I like these things, but there are some problems with them, right? If the assumptions about how your dates work line up with the assumptions of these built-in functions, things work fantastic, right? However, if they don't, you cannot change these things. They only work the way that they work. Furthermore, what's in these cans of time intelligence? Who knows? How do these things work? It's not really clear by looking at the function what it does. So when you get strange behavior, which by the way, you will get when you try and use these built-in CAM time intelligence functions, and your boss asks you, hey, where does that number come from? Your answer is, I have no idea. And they'll say, can you look into it? And you'll say, sure, I can look into it, but I could stare at it for 100 hours. I won't ever really know how the thing works. Now that a lot of work. So it's nice in that for some kind of light reporting, these built-in time intelligence functions will handle that for you. However, you really need to learn how to write these things in DAX, right? Because if you have odd business behaviors that you need to build into it, well, if you write the formulas yourself, you can build in whatever logic you want. And when your boss asks, hey, where does that weird number come from? If you understand DAX enough to write the formulas, you understand DAX enough to go figure out where that weird number came from and either say, here's why our old logic was broken and I fixed it, or actually the old logic was correct and here's what that means. But you have the power to both understand it and add on to it, which is not something you can do with these sort of canned time intelligence functions. Okay. If I don't pause and ask for questions, I forget to breathe. So I'm going to pause for just a second. Are there any questions out there? They can either be, I don't know how big our crowd is. My guess is we could probably just have people yell out if they want, or you could drop it in the chat window. pause for a second. Where's that window? I don't know where my chat window is. Where is my chat window? Let's see, let's pop this open. Okay, sounding good. Sounding good. So here's the thing about DAX. DAX thinks in tables, and so should you, right? So DAX, even more so than SQL, is a language that thinks entirely in tables. And time intelligence formulas are one of the absolute best ways to get started learning the language in this deep table-based way. Now, the concepts around thinking in tables are kind of difficult to explain in words, but they become much, much easier once you can actually see them. So part of what I'm going to try and do today, in fact, most of what I'm going to try and do today, is take these concepts and show them to you visually. Because if you can actually see the tables, if you can kind of imagine them, it will be a lot easier to pick up the concepts behind what we're talking about. Okay? Tables, tables, tables. DAX is the language of tables. So I am a simple man, and I'm going to be using a very simple model today. The reason I'm using a simple model is I want it to be so darn small that it will fit on a page, much like it currently fits on this page. So our data model is only going to have two tables in it, the sales table and the quarter table, right? And they're going to have a relationship based on quarter to quarter. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, so we've got two slides. Sorry, I've got slides for this, right? The sales table is going to have all of our sales transactions. For every single sales transaction, we're going to have how much money we made here in the amount column. And we're also going to have the quarter that it happened. Now, it's not Q4 or Q3. It's this quarter number, which is going to tie it back to the dim quarter table, right? So the dim quarter table is going to have all the quarters of data that we're going to be working with. So we've got 1, 2, 3 years, 2016, 2017, 2018. And for each year, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters, right? Now, normally, if you were doing DAX out in the real world, you wouldn't have a dim quarters table. You would have a dim dates table. So you wouldn't roll up your sales at the quarterly level. You'd report them on the daily level. The reason we're going to do quarters, we're going to roll it up to quarters rather than dates, is if I were to try and ask you to imagine a dim dates table, well, 3 years worth of dates is several thousand rows. All you can do is wave your hands and kind of imagine it. However, if we work with just 3 years of data, we could squeeze the entire table visually onto a single page. So that's why we're rolling up. However, all the concepts that we're going to be talking about here with dim quarter will translate very, very nicely to a standard dim date dimension, right? So did I miss anything here? I've got some notes for myself. By the way, if you've not heard the terminology dim before, it stands for dimension. Just think category. It's a standard way of setting up data in Power BI and frankly, business intelligence in general, that you've got your data tables and those are going to tie to what are called dimension tables, which usually hold all the categories. Just think categories. So these are going to be the categories for time. And here they are, right? Now, there's a relationship between these two tables, right? So a relationship is a bit like VLOOKUP in Excel or very much like a left outer join in SQL. And what that's going to allow for is it's going to allow, I think I've got a slide for this, it's going to allow things like this, where if we have a slicer for a year, and year is in the dim quarter table, if we have that slicer and we click on something like 2017, what that slicer is going to do is it's going to filter down this table to just look at those 4 quarters, the 4 quarters of 2017, right? And when it does so, that filter will not only filter the dimension table, the quarters table, the filter will also travel downstream and filter these sales tables so that we're only looking at these sales transactions that occur in 2017. Now, for an end user, they don't know or care that any of this exists. They click on 2017, and this number now represents 2017 sales. From a mechanical point of view, the filter is the thing, right? There's the filter right there that allows the filter here on the quarter table to travel downstream to any subsequent fact tables. In this case, the sales table, right? So do I have an initial thing? Oh yeah, okay, good. I do have a thing on this. So some folks may have noticed that my keys, right? Here I've got my primary key for my dim quarter table. The connective tissue between my dimension table and my sales table is based on these incrementing numbers, right? So, you know, I could have written out in text 2016-Q1, 2016-Q2, and had that same matching pattern over here. And that would have worked, but it's going to get in the way for our time intelligence. The fact that we've got these incrementing numbers is actually going to be very, very helpful for us. What this is going to mean is if we know that we're in a particular quarter, say Q1 of 2017, well, we know that that's quarter 5. So if we want to go back a quarter, we could take that number 5 and just subtract 1 to get to 4, which is going to be the previous quarter. If we're down that same quarter of 5 and we want to go forward, we could take 5 and add 1 to it. We jump to the next quarter, right? So when you're doing this time intelligence stuff, these incrementing columns here, I've got it called quarter number. Those are going to be very, very helpful to us. Okay. Pause again for any questions. And at some point, I'll figure out how to work chat in Zoom. I've done it before. I'm pretty sure I did it yesterday, but for some reason, oh, there we go. Is there any chat? Okay, I'll quiet on the Western front. I'll quiet on the Western front. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to be using in this presentation some DAX to draw tables dynamically, right? So you can rename this presentation fun with fixed width fonts if you would prefer. So I'm going to use some fancy DAX to take a table that looks like this in our data model, right? There's the button you click on the left-hand side. There's the table loaded. I'm actually going to redraw it, so it's going to look kind of like this. So when you see this, sort of think of this table in your actual data model. Likewise, when we've got the sales table over here on the left-hand side, when you click that little button, I'm going to redraw it using some DAX so that it looks like this. So these are just DAX representations of my tables. Okay. So with that in mind, I'd like to emphasize sort of how filtering works in DAX a little bit, right? I'm simplifying a little bit, but this is a good way to think of it, right? So if I've got my quarter table right here, and I've got my sales table right here, right now all the rows are visible. If an end user were to click on, say, a filter for 2017, what that means is it's going to filter down the dim quarter table to just look at these rows right here, the 2017 quarters, right? And likewise, because of that relationship, that filter will travel downstream and hit my sales table so that we're just looking at the quarters that are in 2017, right? So that's what we mean when we say visible, that it's the rows that you can actually see based on the filters that are currently in place, okay? Now, for the people that are a bit more steeped in this stuff, you might notice these blank rows in here, and you might be asking yourself, Brian, do the rows actually blank out behind the scenes? No, I'm actually just leaving these blank rows in there because it's going to make it a little bit easier when we slice and dice to see which quarters we're talking about. So really, if I clicked on 2017, you wouldn't see these blanks. You'll just see the 4 rows that are actually visible. But actually being able to see the blanks will help you understand what's visible and what's not. Okay. Pause again for questions. That chat window is awfully quiet. I think you guys are conspiring against me. Okay. So let's talk about the problem in tables before we actually get into Power BI, right? So for a given cell, the basic idea behind time intelligence, the basic problem we're trying to solve is for a particular cell, the default filters provided by either slicers or the current row of the table that the calculation is in are not correct. So for example, right, let's say that I've got a slicer that looks like this, which has got, you know, all 4 years and for each year, all 3 years, and for each year, all 4 quarters, and I select Q2 of 2017, right? So by default, the only visible quarter is Q2 of 2017. That's what this slicer does, right? It produces a filter that looks kind of like this. So we're only looking at Q2 of 2017, which is all nice and good for a regular, you know, sum of sales calculation. However, with time intelligence, we want things like previous year sales, year-to-date sales, rolling 4-quarter sales, right? So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take these default filters that we inherit from the slicer, right, that we get from the slicer. Programming people don't think too much about the word inherit. The default filter that we get from the slicer, right, and we're going to have to use some DAX to reshape it and create a new filter, right? So if by default, when we click on Q2 of 2017, we're looking at Q2 of 2017, for a previous year calculation, we're going to want Q2 of 2016. So we're going to have to take this and build a table where just Q2 of 2016 is visible, right? That's what we're going to do. And once we have this table, we could use it as a filter to go get sales for Q2 of 2016, AKA previous year sales. Similarly, again, we've got Q2 of 2017 selected, right? This is the default set of quarters that are visible based on that selection, right? If we want a year-to-date calculation, well, what do we want? Well, if we're in Q2 of 2017, we want Q1 and Q2 of 2017, all of the quarters for the current year to date, right? So we wouldn't have these visible. We have to create a table that looks like this, where we have Q1 and Q2 of 2017, right? Once we have this table, we could use it to go get sales for sales year to date. Lastly, if we've got a rolling 4-quarter calculation, well, the default filters are all wrong, right? So we need to take this table and rebuild a table that looks like this. So instead of just looking at Q2 of 2017, we get this quarter and the previous 3, or a rolling 4-quarter calculation. So we get Q2 of 2017, Q1, Q4 of 2016, and Q3 of 2016. So we're going to have to start with this and build these guys. That's what time intelligence is all about. Pause again for questions. Okay. Drum roll, please. We don't need a drum roll. Let's go look at Power BI. I think that's it for this. Yeah. Oh, all right. So this is the pattern. You can kind of ignore this. I felt obliged to add this in here. For what it's worth, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to use the min and the max functions to get some math to figure out what the old boundaries were of our tables and go generate some new boundaries. We're then going to use the all function to get all the quarters and just keep a new subset of the quarters, that new table I was showing you just a second ago. Once we got that new table, we use the calculate function to take it and add it as a filter. So we stop looking at the old quarters that we don't like and start looking at the new quarters that we do like. Okay, if that seemed a bit fuzzy, don't worry about it. We're going to show it to you in just a second. Speaking of which, hey, is it demo time? It is demo time. Demo time's so much fun. I should also add, you guys are the first folks to see this presentation. I'm pretty excited about it. If there's a couple parts that are a little rough around the edges, my apologies, but I think you're going to like it. I hope you do anyways. Okay, so let's go bring open, no. Let's go bring you over here. Okay, I'll close this guy. Okay, so very simple data model. I've just got dim quarters, which kind of looks like this, and I've got sales, which kind of looks like this. These guys over here are just little hints to remind you, oh, quarter number 2, well, that's Q2 of 2016, right? Those are just the actual rows right there. Okay, so if I have a measure like total sales, which has the very complex DAX formula of sum of the sale amount column, it does what you expect, right? So if I'm looking at everything, I got $90,000, hooray. If I click on 2017, well, now I'm looking at $22,000. For an end user, that makes perfect sense. Well, what happened? Well, if you notice here, as soon as I clicked on 2017, right, let me unclick it, right? Now with it unselected, we're looking at all the quarters. As soon as I click on 2017, we're just looking at the 2017 quarters. Because we're just looking at these quarters, which goes from 5, 6 to 7 to 8, well, that's going to filter downstream and filter our sales table. So we're only getting transactions that happened in 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Notice we sold 3 things in quarter 7. I guess it was a slow quarter, right? So as I sort of click on these things to slice and dice, like if I click on Q3, that'll filter that down, which will in turn filter down the sales table. And when I sum up this amount column, well, now I'm just looking at these transactions, which correspond to Q3 of 2016. If I go click on a different one, like let's go find one with a couple quarters. There we go. Q1 of 2018. Well, that filters down like that. And now I'm just looking at those 3 transactions, which I sum up to get $17,000, which is the $17,000 that you see right there. Okay, before we get too much further, pause again for questions, either on mic or in chat. Okay. So that's the easy one. That's not too complicated. Let's go look at some motivation for why we're going to build some of the formulas that we're going to build, right? So we're going to build a previous quarter calculation, primarily because it's the easiest one for me to show you. But what we could do with it is if we have a total sales calculation and a previous quarter calculation, well, then we could have a quarter over quarter growth because we could just take the total sales and basically subtract the previous quarter sales from it. Or I always get the order mixed. We could subtract one from the other and we'll see how much bigger or smaller our sales is quarter over quarter, right? Similarly, we're also going to build a rolling 4 quarters calculation, right? So basically what we're going to do is for whatever quarter we're looking at, we're going to look at that quarter and the previous 4. Now, what we could do with this is if we've got a rolling 4 quarters, we can then take that calculation, divide it by 4, and get a moving average, which is quite handy. But in order to get that moving average, we have to start with the rolling 4 quarters, R4Q, right? Previous year calculation, well, that's similar to previous quarter, except instead of going back a quarter, it goes back a year, right? So if you look like right here, if we're looking at Q1 of 2017, well, the previous year sales is the sales from Q1 of 2016, 1 year back, okay? That one's kind of obvious. If we've got those two, just like up here, instead of doing a quarter over quarter growth, we could do a year over year growth. For a year-to-date calculation, right, those are pretty obvious. It's just sort of stair steps. You get all the sales for whatever quarter you're in, up for the entire year up through the current quarter that we're looking at. Okay. So let's go actually do some of these. I'm going to go over and do previous quarter here, right? Now, when we start off, we've got too much stuff to look at. I'm going to give you a quick tour, but then we'll do it a little bit slower, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to start by assuming that we've got Q2 of 2017 selected, right? We're going to start by taking the default quarters that we've got visible, and we're going to use it to figure out which quarter is visible. And to do that, we're going to take and max the quarter column to get 6, right? If we know we're in quarter 6, well, we could subtract 1 from that to get the previous quarter, right? So we know that quarter number is 5. We then use the all function to go get a table of all the quarters, right? And then we're going to stick it in the filter function to say, we don't want to keep all the quarters. We just want to keep the ones that are in quarter 5. That'll produce a table that looks like this, which is, again, offset from this one. So instead of looking at Q2 of 2017, we're looking at Q1 of 2017. Once we got that table, we're going to stick it in a variable called override quarters, which we could then pass into the calculate function to say, go take the sum of the sale amount column, but when you're doing it, do it for these quarters, not these quarters, these quarters. That's what calculate's going to do. Okay, so let's do that one piece at a time. One piece at a time. So I'm going to start out, kind of empty this out so you can see it a little bit better, right? So let's start by getting the default quarters. Default quarters. So if we've got this selected, right, the only default quarter is Q2 of 2017. If I select Q1, well, then it's Q1, but we're going to look at Q2, okay? So instinctively in my head, I should know if I want a previous quarter calculation, I need to go from 6 to 5. Well, here's how we do it, right? We've got this table, the default quarters. We're going to find some edges, right? So we're going to take the max of the quarter column. So we've got this column right here, which has the number of each quarter. If we take the max of it, we get what the last quarter is currently visible, right? And we're going to make an adjustment to it. The adjustment we're going to make is we're going to subtract 1 because 6 is the current quarter. We want the previous one. So we subtract 1, and that gives us our number of 5, which is the previous quarter. And we like that number so much, we're going to stick it in a variable called VR variable new quarter. This is going to be the new quarter that we look at, okay? But right now, this number doesn't help us. What we need is a table that looks like this, but offset by a row. So here's how we build it. We start by using the all function, all of dim quarter, to go get all the quarters, not just the visible ones, but all of them. There they are. There's all the quarters, all 12 of them. We then take this and throw it in the filter function and say, go take that table with all the quarters, and I just want you to keep the ones where for every single row, check to see if the quarter number is equal to VR new quarter, right? So let me add a little hint here. And in this particular instance, VR new quarter is 5. So basically what we're saying is go through each one of these rows and see if the quarter is equal to 5. Well, these first 4, 1 isn't, 2 isn't, 3 isn't, 4 isn't. Those are all false. 5 is equal to 5. So we get a true right there. And all the other ones are false. And so what does the filter function do? The filter function is going to take this column, this table with the column that we just added to it, this expression column, that said which rows do we want to keep, and it's just going to keep the true rows. So we're going to get a new table that just has that row right there, and it's going to look like that, right? So now we've got a new table that has dim quarters, right? But instead of having Q2 of 2017, we've got Q1. This is the right table that we want. This we can now use as a filter. This is the quarters that we want to look at if we want to look at sales for the previous quarter, okay? So we're going to stick it in a variable. Stick it in a variable called VR override quarters, okay? So now that we've got it, we're going to pause for a second and do things the wrong way. And by wrong way, I'm going to go take a basic sum. So I'm going to show you what the total sales calculation is without this, right? So if I just do very basic sum of the sale amount column, well, the default filters are for Q6 or quarter number 6. So we'd get sales for that, the thing that is selected, that one right there. If we want to do the sum of the sale amount, but just for these quarters, what we do is we take this bit of code right here and we wrap it in a calculate function. And we say, I want you to go do this, but I want you to do it with this new filter right here. And it looks like that. Calculate, go take the sum of the sale amount column. But when you do it, be sure you do it with this new filter. That filter right there. Get rid of those old filters for quarters, and I want to look at these new ones. Okay? So let's go ahead and do it. I'm sorry, what is the visual to the right? Which one? This guy right here, panel D?
That was a long time ago, dude.
Oh, never mind. Never mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and twirl open measures. And I'm going to go get my previous quarter calculation. Assuming I can successfully use a mouse, right? And so I've already got one finished. It's the one you see right there. Here we've got a demo one, right? So let's just sort of think about, before we actually start typing, let's just think about what we're doing. We're going to use an aggregation, max specifically, to go find our edges. We're going to go find that 6 number, right? Right there. Then we're going to subtract 1 from it to get the previous quarter, right? Once we know that, we know what our new quarter is supposed to be. We use the all function to get the table with all the quarters in it, right? And then we use the filter function to say, I just want to keep some of the rows. Which ones? The ones where that quarter, that the quarter of that row is equal to that new quarter that we got up here, right? This whole bit of code right here will produce the table that has the new quarters we want to look at. Then to use them in our calculation, we're going to say, okay, go calculate the sum of the sale amount. But when you do, be sure you do it with these new filters, not whatever the default filters are, the new ones. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go ahead, oops. And, oh, there's a 0 up there. I'm going to kill that. Up. VR, new quarter. So we're going to do a max of dim quarter number. It's a lot easier to type code live if you have it written one line above. Okay, so we're going to go whatever cell we're in, and this has to be dynamic, whatever cell we're in, go figure out what the last quarter is. That's what quarter we're quote unquote currently in, and subtract 1 to go get the previous quarter, okay? That gives us the number, the new quarter we want, but we don't need a number, we need a table. So to get that table, we're going to say, oh, create a variable, sorry. Create a variable called VR override quarters, right? These are the new quarters that we want to look at, not the default ones, the new ones. So we say go filter, go get all of the dim quarter table, every single row, visible or not, but we just want to keep some of the quarters. Which quarters do we want to keep? The ones where the quarter number is equal to that new quarter that we got just a second ago, right? So this bit of code will produce the table of quarters, right? These are the table of quarters we want to look at. And now to actually use the thing, we're going to say, return, this is the actual answer to my question, go calculate the sum of the SLAs, the sales amount column, the amount column in the sales table. But when you perform it, I want you to do it with a new filter. Specifically, the filter I want is these new override quarters, the ones for the previous quarter. Okay. With that, I go ahead and hit enter. And I could take this guy, Control C, Control V. And I can take it and drop it right in there. Okay, questions about that? So I think when we started out and these were all empty, they were probably pretty confusing. I think by the time we've gone through all of them, hopefully it makes sense. And if it doesn't yet, I'm going to do this a couple more times, and I think by the end it'll make a bit more sense. Other questions so far out there? Either in chat, you can come right off mic. Either way, it's just fine. I hear an open mic, but I'm not sure if it's just an open mic or a question. Sounds like it. Open mic. Okay. So let's do following quarters, which isn't very interesting from a business point of view, but it's close enough to the previous example that hopefully it'll sort of introduce you to these concepts a little bit better. Okay. So what we want to do is if we've got a particular quarter selected, say Q2 of 2017, well, if we want sales for the following quarter, we want Q3 of 2017. If I've got Q4 of 2017 selected, the following quarter should be Q1 of 2018. So whatever quarter we're in, we want to sort of offset and move forward a quarter. That's the kind of calculation that we want. Okay. And again, let's just sort of build through this. Let's go through how we're going to do this. Okay. So we're going to start by getting the default quarters for whatever calculation we're in. If I'm looking at 2017, I'll be looking at those rows. If I'm looking at everything, I'll see all the rows. If I'm looking at just Q2 of 2017, well, sure enough, I just see Q2 of 2017. And now I got to find some edges, find the old edges. Specifically, I want to find the max of the quarter again, just to figure out what quarter we're in. Well, we are now in quarter 6, okay? Now, I don't want quarter 6. The entire idea is to get a different quarter. Specifically, I want to add 1 to this so that I could get the following quarter, the new quarter being number 7. So instead of looking at quarter 6, we want to start looking at quarter number 7. Okay. So now that we got that number, which we've stuck in a variable called VR new quarter, we need to go build our new table that's going to act as our new filter. So we're going to start by using the all function to get all of the quarters. There they are, all 12 of them, not just the visible ones, which is that one right there, but all 12 of them. And we're going to take that and stick it in the filter function and say, I'm only going to keep some of these. The filter function is going to take argument 2 right there and add it as a column, an expression column, a special temporary column that's just going to be around long enough to do something. Specifically, it's going to be around long enough to figure out which rows we want to keep. So what we're saying is go get all the quarters and just keep the ones where the quarter number is equal to VR new quarter. What's VR new quarter? I already forgot. VR new quarter is 7. So we're saying keep all the quarters that are quarter number 7. So we get a bunch of falses, 1 through 6. On 7 right there, well, 7 equals 7, so we get a true. The filter function is going to keep it, right? And it's going to dump all the other ones, okay? So the filter function is just going to keep those true rows, right? And so now, instead of looking at Q2 of 2017, we're looking at Q3 of 2017. Hey, cool, we've got a table of the quarters that we want to be looking at for a following quarter calculation. So now we take that table and stick it in a variable called VR override quarters. These are going to be the overriding set of quarters that we want to look at. We don't want to look at these. We do want to look at these. We're overriding our set of quarters, right? And then we're going to start by doing the thing that's wrong. We're going to start by saying, okay, if I just did the sum of the sale amount column without using calculate, I'd be looking at Q2 of 2017. To perform that same sum of the sale amount column, right? But to do it looking at these quarters, I take that sum and wrap it in a calculate. And I say, go calculate, go take the sum of the sale amount column, but do so using these new quarters, those quarters right there, okay? So let's go ahead and do another example. I'm going to type it out, okay? So here we've got this typed out. Okay, so just like before, we're going to start by finding our edges. So we're going to, well, actually, we're going to start by removing this placeholder 0, right? So we're going to start by saying, okay, before we can do anything else, we have to figure out what quarter we're in, right? So we're going to start by creating a variable called new quarter. This will be the new quarter that we want to look at, but we're going to start by figuring out what quarter we're in by taking the max of that quarter number column, right? So we're going to take the max of the quarter number column, which in this case, if we're looking at Q2, is going to give us 6, right? And then we're going to add 1 to it, which will give us the number for the following quarter, right? As a number 7 right there. And we're going to stick it in a variable called new quarter so that we could use it in the filter function. Okay, cool. So now that we got that bit done, we're going to use that number to generate a new table of the new quarters that we want to look at. So I'm going to type in VAR to create a new variable, and this new variable is going to be called VR override quarters. This is the new set of quarters that I want to look at. I want to look at the quarters for the following quarter calculation. So what do I do here? I use the filter function to say, hey, go get a table and just keep some of the rows. The table we want to get is all the quarters, visible or not, all 12 of them. So we're going to do all dim quarter. And which rows do we want to keep? Well, we don't want to keep all of them. We just want to keep the rows where each row's quarter number is equal to that number we got up here, that new quarter, which is going to be the following quarter. So just keep the quarters that are the following quarter. And this will produce a table, right? This will produce a table that we're going to use to change the filters, So what we're going to do is we're going to return, this is going to be our actual answer, go calculate the sum of the sale amount column, right? But when you do, I don't want you to use the default filters. I want you to use a new set of filters, a new set of quarters, specifically the override quarters. I go ahead, hit enter, and now I will get sales for the following quarter. Okay, let's go take this guy, Control C, Control V, assuming I can get my keyboard to work. There we go. And now I could take my following quarter sales demo and drop it right in there, right? I'm going to go ahead and hide this bit right here just so we can see this a little more clearly. Notice, whatever quarter we're looking at, we go 1 quarter forward, right? That's the way that this logic is going to work. That's what we have to build. That's what we use this code to build. Okay. Pause again for questions. Anybody want to see anything again? Okay, so let's do something slightly more complex. Let's go to a rolling 4 quarters. Rolling 4 quarters. Okay. So previous quarter and following quarter is pretty easy. You take the number, you just add or subtract 1 to it. With a rolling 4 quarters, what we want to do is whatever quarter we're looking at, we want that plus the previous 3 quarters. So instinctively, if I'm looking at Q2 of 2017, I want that quarter plus the 3 before it, which is, you know, a rolling 4 quarters. Okay. So here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start with our default quarters, right? These are the default visible quarters based on this selection of Q2 2017. That's what's visible right now, quarter-wise. Okay. So now we're going to find some edges because that's what we always do, right? So we're going to find the old edges. We're going to say, hey, we're actually going to get 2 edges this time. So we're going to get 2 new edges for our new window. We're going to twice. We're going to get the max of the quarter column to get 6 and 6. Why are we going to get 2? Well, because our new window is going to have both a starting and an ending quarter. Specifically, we're going to subtract 3 to go get the sort of starting edge, and we're going to subtract 0 or do nothing to get the ending edge, right? So we want this plus the following 3. Okay, so we're going to go from quarters 3 to 6. So we should get 3, 4, 5, and 6, which will be our rolling 4 quarters. Okay. So now that we got our numbers, 3 and 6, which correspond to the new edges of quarters we want to look at, we stuck them in these variables, new quarter start and new quarter end. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get all the quarters using the all function. Use the all function against dim quarter to go get all the quarters, visible or not, right? And then we're going to say, all right, we don't want to keep all of them. We just want to keep the ones between 3 and 6. So how do we do that? Well, of course, we use the filter function. We say, hey, don't keep all the rows. Just keep the rows where a certain condition is true. So here's our test to determine which rows we want to keep. For each row, check to see if that row's quarter is greater than or equal to the new quarter start, which is 3 right there, and the same quarter is less than or equal to the new quarter end, which is that 6 right there. So basically what we're saying is go through all the rows and keep the ones where the number is between 3 and 6. So for 1 and 2, we get false. For 3, 4, 5, and 6, well, those are all between 3 and 6. So we get true, 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 true. Then everything after that, 7 and beyond, we get falses. So what do we got? We got trues here for the columns, the quarters that we want, right? The quarters Q3 through Q2 for 2017. So we keep the true rows. We keep the true rows. And in doing so, we now have a set of quarters that corresponds to a rolling 4 quarters. Whatever quarter we're looking at plus the previous 3. If I change what my selection is here, I will always get whatever quarter I have selected plus the previous 3, right? So those are the quarters that we want. Okay, good. So now that we've got those quarters, we want to use them in a calculation. We want to say, go take the sum of the sale amount column, but in doing so, I want you to use these new quarters, right? So we stick that in a variable called VR override quarters, right? And we can't just use the sum of the sale amount because that's looking at the default quarters. We want the sum of the sale amount looking at these quarters. So we take this code and wrap it in a calculate. We say, hey, go take the sum of the sale amount column, but use a different filter. Calculate. Go do this with these filters in place. Stop looking at those. Start looking at these. Okay? Okay, let's do this one. Let's do it. Again, it's always easier to type out code if it's been written out for you, right? So we're going to start. We're going to start by finding our edges. Thankfully, this is being recorded. So, okay, we're going to start by getting a new quarter start. Assuming I can spell properly, new quarter start. And to do that, we're going to find the very last quarter that's visible. So we're going to take the max, the dim quarter column, right? We're going to do it twice. Each time it's going to give us 6, which is Q2 of 2017, right? And to find the new starting quarter, we're going to subtract 3, right? And to find the old starting quarter, I'm sorry, the new quarter end, the quarter we want to end on, well, that's going to be the max of dim quarter. But we don't have to make any changes to it, right? So we're going to say we want all the quarters that go between this -3 and just itself. So this quarter plus the previous 3, okay? So now that we've got our numbers, we have to go get a table with all the quarters and just keep the ones that are between this and this. So I'm going to type in VAR, create a variable called override quarters. And I'm going to use the filter function to say, I want a table, and I just want to keep some of the rows. So the table that I want to filter the rows of, if you want to think of it that way, only keep certain rows, is all of the quarter table. Go get all the quarters. And which ones do we want to keep? Well, we don't want to keep all of them. We just want to keep the quarters where each row's quarter is greater than or equal to the new quarter start. And 2 ampersand means and, right? It's got to be meets both of these conditions. That same quarter is also less than or equal to the new quarter end, right? So what we're saying is go get all the quarters and just keep the ones where the quarter is between this number and that number, which will give us those rolling 4 quarters as a table, right? Now that we've got that table, we've stuck it in a variable called VR override quarters. All we have to do is say, hey, DAX, I want you to use that as a filter. If we have a table and we want to add it as a filter, that's what the calculate function does. That's why it exists. That's what it's for, right? So we're going to say, in fact, I'll even write this one a little bit different. I'm going to return, right, calculate. And I'm actually going to leave argument 1 blank for a second, right? So what we're saying here is I'm going to go perform some calculation, but when I do, I want to use a new set of filters. So whatever's in argument 1 is going to get done looking at the new quarters, right? So what do I want to do when I'm looking at those new quarters? I'm going to take the sum of that amount column, the sale amount column. There we go. Take the sum of the sale amount, looking at those new quarters, the rolling 4 quarters. Okay. And let's see if this thing works or if I made a boo-boo. Take that there. There we go, 13,000. Sales for Q2 and the previous 3 quarters. We get our rolling 4 quarters.
I have a question.
Sure, please, yes.
How do you change the adjust amount? Because if you change, for example, on this one, it was what, 3 minus 3, and the previous one, it was plus 1.
Right.
So is that adjust amount just specific to that particular tab, or?
It's particular to the calculation, right? So if you go, I'll go look at in fact, I'll look at the simpler code that doesn't have like 2 versions of everything, right? Here's the simplified version of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the adjust amount is just the number that I add to my basic aggregations to find my edges. So if I want to change it, if I want this to be not a rolling 4 quarters, but like a rolling 8 quarters, right? I just take this, instead of doing 3, I do 8 minus 1, which is 7, right? I just change it to whatever I want to. I can do a rolling 2 quarters, 12, 100,000, whatever you want to pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could even do things like having a centered average where I get, that's not the right way to write it. So where I get the current quarter, 3 before and 3 after. So I could get kind of like a weighted centered average. Does that help a little bit?
Right, okay.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, now I got to set it back because I messed the whole thing up. Okay, what did I do wrong? There we go. Any other questions out there? Shall we do another one? Let's do another one. So let's get a previous year calculation. Previous year calculation. So what do we want? Well, here I'm going to hide this. I'm going to show you the result and start with that. Whatever quarter we're looking at, we want to look at that same quarter for the previous year. So if we're looking at Q2 of 2017, we want to look at Q2 of 2016. So if we start with Q2 of 2017 selected, we want to make a table that looks like this, where we get Q2 of 2016, right? If I get Q1 of 2018, right, Q1 of 2018, well, I want to go back a year, so it should be Q1 of 2017, okay? That's what we kind of want to build. So here is how we're going to build it. It's the same pattern over and over again, so slight variations, okay? So we're going to start by looking at our default quarters, okay? So if I've got Q2 of 2017 selected, the only quarter that's visible is Q2 of 2017, which for, by the way, what it's worth is quarter number 6. You probably have that memorized by now, okay? So what do we want to do with this? Well, as you can guess from this thing down here, we're going to find our edges, right? So we're going to use an aggregation. Before it didn't really matter because we were looking at one quarter. This calculation is actually going to work both at the quarter and the year level. So we're going to use two different aggregations, right? So we're going to do a min and a max. Now, if we're just looking at one quarter, we get the same number. Who cares? But notice if I click on 2017, like the entire year, right? Well, if I click on that, I get quarters 5, 6, 7, and 8. If I take the min and the max, I will find out that for what I have selected right now, the first quarter is 5, and the last quarter is 8, okay? In fact, speed, let's just actually do it. Let's just go do this calculation for 2017. So what do we want if we've got 2017 selected? We should get all the quarters for 2016, right? So I'm going to jump ahead real quick. If we're looking at 2017, what we want is all the quarters in 2016. That's where we're going towards. Okay, step back again. Okay, so we start with the default quarters. We've got the entire year selected. We're going to find some edges. We're going to get the min and the max of that column, right? So we get 5 and 8, right? And if you think about it, if we want to go back a year, well, how many quarters are in a year? 4. So what do we do with these? What's the adjustment we do? We just subtract 4 from each of them. So if we take 5 and subtract 4, we get 1, which, by the way, is going to be Q1 of 2016. That's going to be our new starting edge, right? And if we take 8, which is the ending edge, and we subtract 4, we get quarter number 4, which will be the new ending quarter for our new window that we're going to produce over here, okay? Okay, so now that we got these things, we're going to stick them in variables. One called VR new quarter start, that's going to be our new starting quarter, and another one called VR new quarter end, that's going to be our new ending quarter. Right now, we're going from 5 to 8. We want to go from 1 to 4. Okay, so how do we do it? Well, we get a table of all the quarters. So we type in all dim quarter, and we get all quarters, not just the visible ones, but all of them, all of them. But we just want to keep a subset, right? So if we've got a table and we just want to keep a subset, well, that's what the filter function is for. We're going to take that filter function, throw this table inside of it, and say, hey, we're going to add this definition for this new temporary column, which will determine which rows we keep and which rows we throw away, right? So if I use the filter function, right, what we're going to say is go get all the quarters. So the all part is sort of that bit right there. And the filter in this bit is this new column that we're going to add. We're going to say, hey, just keep the rows where this is true. So this is the definition of that column right there, right? For every single row, check to see if that row's quarter is greater than or equal to the new quarter start, and that quarter is less than or equal to the new quarter end. I'm going to add some little hints here. So it's another way of saying keep all the quarters that are between 1 and 4, right? So if I think about row 1 right there, right, to figure out whether this is true or false, we say, hey, that quarter number 1 right there, is that greater than or equal to 1? Well, yeah, it's equal to 1. Okay. And is it also less than or equal to 4? Well, yeah, 1 is less than 4. Okay, so it's both that's true and that's true. So we get a true for that row. And we do that same test, row by row by row, based on that definition right there. Is the row between 1 and 4? Okay. Now, what do we do with this new column? Everywhere that we get a true, those are the rows that we keep. It's going to throw them in a new table, a new temp table, right? So we keep the true rows. That's what the filter function does, right? The output of this code right here is a table that looks like that, right? And so now, what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to start by throwing it in a variable. We're going to put it in a variable called VR, just variable, override quarters. These are the new quarters that we want to look at. The defaults are right there. These are the new ones. Let me sort of hide this bit in the middle so you can see them side by side, right? The default is there. those quarters of 2017. The new ones are all those same quarters, but for 2016, right? So we've successfully built our new table that has the new quarters that we want to look at. Now, in order to use this in a calculation and say, I want you to go perform sales looking at these 4 quarters, right? We take the very simple sum of the sale amount column that's looking at just the default quarters, and we say, no, I want to modify this. I want to perform this aggregation, but I want to do it just for these quarters right there. So what do? I take this bit of code and wrap it inside a calculate so that it looks like this. The sum was there a second ago, and we put it as argument 1 of calculate. Say, I want to go do that, but when I do it, I want to do it just looking at these quarters. Just look at those quarters right there. So go take the sum of the sale amount, but just looking for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are the 4 quarters of 2016. Okay, and so when I sum that up, I get the sum of these new visible quarters, which are just looking at 2016 quarters, and I get 28,000, which sure enough corresponds to previous year's sales. Okay, before I type it out, any questions? Okay, let's type this one out. So, previous year sales demo right there. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by getting our edges. In fact, I'll even walk through each other. We're going to get our edges using min and max right there to get the edges of what quarters are currently visible, the default quarters, right? We're going to subtract 4 from each of them, which will give us our new edges. So we take the min and the max, we subtract 4, and we subtract 4. Those gives us our new edges that we put in these variables, new quarter start and new quarter end. But those are just numbers. We need a table that has those quarters. So we say, okay, go get all the dim quarters, visible or not, all 12 of them, and just keep the rows where this is true, where each row's quarter is between that and that. So this minus 4 and that minus 4, right? And this whole bit of code right here will produce a table, the table that was here a second ago, that is all the quarters in the previous year, right? And then when we want to use it in a filter, we say, okay, calculate. Calculate says go perform some set of code with new filters. This is the code that we want to perform with new filters. Those are the new filters that we want to add, or the new filter that we want to add, singular. Okay. So let's do it. Create a variable called VR new quarter start, which is going to be the min of that dim quarter column. And I'm going to subtract 4, right, to essentially go back a year. So find what the first quarter is currently, go back 4 to figure out what that would be a year ago. And we're going to do the same thing to find the end, right? We're going to take the max of dim quarters. This is going to be the last quarter that is visible by default, right? And we're going to subtract 4 again. So we're going to find what's currently visible, beginning and end, and take each of them and go back 4, which will give us the edges of our new quarters, the quarters for the previous year, okay? But right now they're just numbers chilling out in these variables. We have to take those numbers and build a table out of them. So here's how we do that. I'm going to create a variable called VR override quarters. I don't know why I spelled it out this time. Hope I spelled it right. VR override quarters, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to use the filter function that says, I'm going to go get a table and just keep some of the rows. I'm going to get a table and add this expression column, this temporary column to it, where I just keep some of the rows. Well, which table do I want? Well, I'm going to start by getting a table that has all the quarters, not just the visible ones, but all of them, right? Even though I've only got 2017 selected, this will give me the quarters for 2016, 2017, 2018, all 12 of them. Which ones do I want to keep? I want to keep the ones where each quarter's number is greater than or equal to the new quarter start, and has to be both of these things, is also less than or equal to the new quarter end, right? So we get the current edges, we subtract 4 of them to get our new edges, and we say just keep the quarters that are from the new quarter start to the new quarter end, which should give us all the quarters for the previous year, right? So that's going to produce a table, right, that has all the quarters for the previous year. If we want to use that table as a filter, that's what the calculate function's for. Pop down here, type in return, calculate. So return says this is what the actual answer is going to be, right? So what's the actual answer? I want you to go calculate the sum of the amount column in the sales table. But when you do it, I don't want you to use the default filters. Before you do this bit of aggregation, I want you to add a filter. Oh, okay, what filter do I want to add? I want to add a filter for the previous year's quarters. Oh, okay, go look the previous year's quarters and then take the sum of the sale amount column? Exactly, that's what I want you to do, Mr. DAX Engine. Okay, so take this guy. Control C, Control V, which never works the first time I do it. And previous year sales demo, get 28,000. Works perfectly. Now notice, this works if I'm looking at entire year. So if I'm looking at 2018, right, I will change to have my overrides only look at the quarters in 2017. It also looks if I'm only using an individual quarter. It works in both conditions. If I'm looking at Q3 of 2017, well, what's the previous year? Q3 of 2016. I start with this visible, I get that visible, right? I go back a year. And then I take the sales of those quarters back a year, okay? Pause for questions. Anything out there? Okay. So we got one more. It's going to be our year-to-date calculation. That's my producer, Ramona, telling me that I have to hurry up. We're a little over on time. She's actually probably not trying to steal her sister's rawhide. Okay, so we're looking at a year-to-date calculation this time, right? So for whatever quarter we're in, we want sales for all the quarters through that quarter in the current year, right? So if I'm looking at Q3 of 2017, I want sales for Q1, 2, and 3 of 2017. If I'm looking for Q4 of 2017, I want sales for Q1, 2, 3, and 4. If I'm looking for Q2 of 2018, I want sales for Q1 and Q2 of 2018. All the sales in the current year through the current quarter, right? So if I click on Q3, just to remind ourselves what we're going to build here, right? If I click on, ooh, did I? Sorry, I've got my window, which makes this run a little better. There we go. So if I've got Q3 of 2017 selected, right? We want not Q3 of 2017. That's what we start with. We want this plus the previous two quarters, Q1, 2, and 3, right? So we're getting the current quarter, but all the other quarters in the current year before that one. Okay. Okay, so that's what we want. Here's how we build it. We're going to start, as we always do, by going and getting our default quarters. In fact, yeah, let's do Q3. That's a more interesting one. So our default quarters, if I've got Q3 of 2017 selected, the only quarter that's visible is Q3 of 2017. That's what this means right here, right? So when I've got this slice down to that quarter right there, the only quarter visible is Q3 of 2017. So that is quarter 7. So we're going to find some edges, right? And we're going to find a slightly different pair of edges this time, right? For the first time in history of this presentation, we're going to find the edge not just of the quarter, but of the year, right? So we're going to take the max of the year column, right? The year SIN number column. So if I take the max of this column right here, well, there's only one number, it's 2017. So the max of 2017, and that's it, is 2017. That essentially tells us what year are we in, okay? So in addition to knowing what year we're in, we also need to know what quarter we're in. So I take the max of the quarter column. So the max of 7 is just 7. Okay, so what adjustments do I do with these? Nothing, right? I wrote down there add 0. You actually don't have to do anything to these. The only actual numbers we need are 2017, the current year, and 7, the current quarter. That way we can get all the sales that are in 2017 through quarter 7. Okay. So these become our new edges, right? The new year we want to look at is 2017, which is not that different. The new quarter end is 7. Okay, so how do we use this information to build our override table? We're going to start by getting all the quarters. We're going to use the function all dim quarter to say, go get all the rows of dim quarter, regardless of whether or not they're visible, right? So if I didn't use this all function, I just typed in dim quarter, I would only get that one right there. But if I use the all function, I get all of them. There's all the quarters. Okay, but we don't want all of them. We just want Q1, Q2, and Q3 of 2017. Well, how do we get that? We use our handy dandy filter function to say, I want to whittle this table down and just keep some of the rows. Okay, so I use the filter function that says I'm going to add this temporary column that's going to determine which rows I keep. And hey, by the way, here's the definition for it, right? Which rows do we want to keep? We want to keep the rows where that row's year is equal to the new year and where the quarter is less than or equal to the new quarter, right? So if we think about, let's think about a row that doesn't work, right? Let's think about that row right there, which is Q4 of 2016. Instinctively, I know that Q4 of 2016 shouldn't be included if we're looking at Q3 of 2017, because that's the previous year. We just want the current year. That's what it means when it says year to date. But how does that work logically? Well, let's look at our tests here, right? So if we're looking at Q4 of 2016, the year, does the year equal the new year? Well, let's go ahead and add our hints there, right? Does the year equal the new year? So does 2016 equal 2017? Well, I don't know if you're a math major or not, but generally speaking, 2016 does not equal 2017. So we get a false for that little bit of our test right there. But there's two conditions. We also check, by the way, is the quarter less than or equal to the new quarter end? Well, the quarter number is 4, which is less than 7. So if you think about it, for this little bit of the code, we get a false. For this little bit of the code, we get a true. But since they're ANDed together, both of these have to be true for us to keep that row. And therefore, we go ahead and throw that row away. By contrast, we look at the next row, right? This is in 2017, and 5 is less than or equal to 7. So both of those are true. That's one of the rows we want to keep, right? So we're going to perform this calculation for each and every row. We get trues. Those are the rows that we're going to keep. The filter function takes this and spits out a table. Spits out a table that looks like this, right? That just has the true rows. There they are, right there, okay? So now that the filter function has produced this table for us, we're going to stick it in a variable. We're going to stick it in a variable called VR override quarters, right? Why? Because we want to use it to override the quarters, right? So we'll take our boring calculation that doesn't work, which is just the sum of the sale amount column, which by default looks at everything. We say, I want you to do this, but I want you to do it looking at these quarters right there. Well, how do I do that? That's what the calculate function is for. The calculate function says, go perform some instructions with new filters, right? So we take this bit of code and wrap it in calculate. And we say, this is the thing I want you to do with new filters. Here's the new filters, right? Go add this filter for all these quarters, Q1, 2, and 3 of 2017. Once you've added that filter, then and only then do I want you to perform the sum of the sale amount column. And when you do it, since we're looking at these quarters, only the year-to-date quarters will be visible. And we will get the numbers that we want to. So when we add all these up, we get 14,000, which corresponds to all the sales for Q1, Q2, and Q3, right? Okay. And that's it. So if I compare these guys again, whichever quarter I'm looking at, I get that quarter and all the other quarters in the current year before it. Okay. Shall we do it? We got one last hurrah for the evening. So I'm going to go get my year-to-date sales demo. So everybody's being really quiet, which means it's either going very, very well or very, very poorly. But as of such, most of y'all haven't dropped, so I appreciate that. So we're going to do one more of these guys. I think then we're going to be able to break for questions. Okay, so we're going to get our edges. We're going to use the filter function to whittle down a table to just the quarters that we want. Then we're going to use the calculate function to add that as a filter and go perform our boring aggregation. Let's go find our edges. VR new year. So the year we want to look at is whatever the current year is. So I take the max of the year column. So go take the max of the year column, right? Now tell us what year we're looking at. Okay, cool. What other bit of information do I need? I also need what quarter we're looking at. And I'm also going to do a max of the quarter column, that number right there, right? So that'll tell us what the current year is and what the current quarter is. We want all the quarters that are in the current year and on or before the current quarter. How do we do that? How do we generate a table that looks like that? Well, with these numbers, we say, okay, start by creating a variable, which at some point in my life I will remember to do. So we're going to create a variable called VR override quarters. And what's going to go in it? Well, we're going to put a table in it. Well, what table are we going to put in it? We're going to use the filter function to say I want to go get a table and just keep some of the rows. The table that I want is all of the quarters, not just the visible ones, which would be Q3 of 2017. I want all of them, all 12 of them. Okay, so now that we've got all 12 quarters, that's what this bit of code produces. The filter function is just going to keep some of them. Which ones do we want to keep? Well, we're going to perform a row by row test. And we're going to say, I want you to keep the quarters where that row's year is equal to the year, and the quarter is less than or equal to the current quarter. Right? And that will give us all of the quarters quarter or year to date. Okay. Now that's going to produce a table with those quarters. When we want to use it as a filter, that's where the calculate function comes in. So this produces a table. This produces a table specifically. Let's see if I can get myself in trouble here. It produces that table right there, right? Now, if we want to use that table right there in order to perform a calculation, right, add it as a filter, that's what calculates for. So I'm going to come down here. I've got all my variables. I'm going to type in return. This is going to be my actual answer, right? So my return is going to be calculate. I want you to go do something with new filters. Argument one is the thing that we're going to do with new filters. I'm actually going to leave it blank for just a second because this is how I think of it. Before I concern myself with what I'm going to do with the new filters in place, I need to know what are the new filters. Well, the new filter is VR override quarter. So this thing produced a table. Calculate's going to add it as a filter. And then when we're all done, what are we going to do? We're going to take the sum of the sale amount column. Boring, boring, boring. But we're going to do it with those new filters, looking at the quarters year to date. And just like that, just like that, just like that, we've got our number. And it will work for whatever quarter we have selected. Okay. Now, once we have these calculations, some of them are, the use is obvious, year-to-date, things like that. What if I want to do ratios? What's the hard work there? What if I want like a 4-quarter moving average or a quarter-over-quarter growth or year-over-year growth? We take the measures we've got and we just subtract them. If I want quarter-over-quarter growth, I take total sales and I subtract previous quarter sales. If I want year-over-year growth, I take total sales and I subtract previous year sales. If I want a 4-quarter moving average, it's a little bit harder. I need to make sure that I'm at least 4 quarters into my data. So go check to see if we're at least past quarter 4. If we are, go take my rolling 4-quarter sales and just divide it by 4. That's my 4-month or my 4-quarter moving average, right? Okay. So that's a lot of stuff. If you're familiar with this, hopefully this will have cemented some new concepts for you. If you're brand new, there's probably a lot of stuff that got thrown at you. And if you caught 25% of it, I think you're actually in good shape. This video is recorded. This is the kind of thing that you can watch over and over and over again. And I hope by watching this thing visually with a lot of repetition, you can really start to pick up these ideas. So with that, I already see there's a question, but I think I have to officially say, questions, do you have them? So yes, there's one question off the bat. So the question is, in which scenarios would you recommend we roll our own time intelligence calculations instead of using the built-in DAX functions? Well, there's 2 answers. The answer for me is I almost never use the built-in time intelligence functions. The reason is, A, it keeps me really well practiced with rolling my own, and B, if anybody ever asks to make modifications, it's very, very easy to do because I have complete control over how the thing operates. Now, that's me. This is my job. I do this 40 hours a week. For regular folks, the short answer is if your business does not use a 445 calendar, you can actually use the can time intelligence functions in a lot of scenarios and they work okay. If you're like, what's a 445 calendar? Congratulate yourself. Your life is a whole lot easier. If you have heard the term 445 calendar before, you're very familiar with it, and those built-in functions won't work with it at all. The higher up your report goes, closer to C-suite, I would do the extra work to build your own because you really want to know how those things work. The built-in functions will throw weird answers under strange situations. And if you don't know how they work, you can't explain it to somebody when they ask you. I would also say, and this is a very long answer to a short question, I apologize for that. Once you understand how to roll these things by hand, I'm a lot more confident in saying, pick whichever one you like, right? Once you understand how you roll these by hand, you've got it in your fingertips, I can explain to you how the built-in ones work, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. And you can save yourself some clicking and typing by using the built-in ones, but then you will know and understand what they're doing internally. Until you know how to roll your own, I can't even really explain it to you. Okay, so that was a very long question. Let me know if there's a follow-on question to that. Is it necessary to have a full date table for time intelligence? If you want to use the canned functions, it's a extremely good idea. You will get some very, very bad results if you try and use the canned time intelligence functions without having a dedicated date table, right? Now, if you're rolling your own, it's still a good idea. You pretty much always want to have a dedicated date table. I use dim quarters here so we can fit it all on one screen. In practice, you'll want to have a date table. I think that's almost always a good idea. And there's so many of them out there, it's pretty easy to poach one from somebody. We've even got one. I've got one for a blog post. You could steal that one. There's lots of ones you could steal, but it's almost always a good idea. This is a very, very small data model. Let me know if that was a good question or if you have a good answer. It was a good question. Let me know if that was a good answer and if you have any follow-up questions. Any other questions out there?
And at this point, if you want to unmute yourselves and ask questions, you're free to do that, or you can continue to use the chat.
Yeah, lay it on me.
I have a question, like, because it seems like all of these functions are based on, choosing one quarter. But
Yeah.
what if, like, you're an executive and everything's been cleared, and then they just see these numbers up at the top and they're like, what does that mean? Because, like, assuming all the years or whatever are chosen,
Yep.
it's going to say year to date. It's like, what does that mean?
Good, very good. So I didn't want to introduce this concept now because, frankly, I already threw too much stuff at you. Step 2 with this is like, essentially, I call it a safety check because I have no actual better description for it. But situations like this, right? If I've got Q3 selected, this makes sense. If I've got Q4 selected, it makes sense. 2018 even makes complete sense. Most people will be, that's fine with that. But if I clear the selection, right, what the heck are these numbers, right? So one of the advantages of learning how to roll your own is you can answer the question, what does that number even mean up there? Because if you can see visually, you can walk through what the process was, right? We got our hints. We found what the last row last year was, 2018. And we kept all of the rows where it was equal to 2018 and less than 12. And that's what we worked with. So, okay, now you can at least explain how it's broken, but how do you fix it? This part's a little bit easier, right? If you have a calculation like year-to-date sales, it doesn't make sense if you have anything more than 1 year selected. So usually the fastest way to fix something like this, I'm going to take this and throw it in a variable just because I think that's a good habit to get into. VR base. Okay, so that's my base answer, but before I show it, I want to make sure if it even makes sense to show something. So I'm going to do a return. So I'm going to do if has one value. There's other ways to do it that are fancier than this, but this one actually works pretty well. Has one value, dim quarter year. What we're asking here is, are we looking at one and only one quarter? I'm sorry, not quarter, year, right? So if we're looking at a year or a quarter, this will bring back a true. And if that's the case, go ahead and just show the answer that we spun up a second ago. If it's not, return a blank. So the easiest way to solve this is to show nothing when the end user's selection doesn't make any sense. So now, oh, I saw that one, right? So notice if I've got a quarter selected, year-to-date actually makes sense as a calculation. If I've got an entire year selected, year-to-date actually makes sense as a calculation. If I select nothing, which is to say I've got 3 years selected, it just shows a blank, right? Does that make a little bit of sense? I can show it to you again, too.
No, that makes sense. Or you could say if it has, instead of blank, it would equal total sales, right? Because it's everything.
Sure. Yeah. From there, you can kind of pick whichever logic you want to, but basically, you figure out what condition you're in. Does it make sense to show an answer, a regular answer? And if it doesn't, you can either show everything or show blank. I tend to be in favor of blank because it tends to have the least follow-on conversations. But if it makes sense for your organization to just show total sales, hey, that's fine too. So
Okay.
yeah, you basically get to pick however you do it, which is one of the benefits of rolling your own like this, is you have complete control over the logic inside of it, right? It gives you a lot of control.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hey,
Let's scratch
this is
it up.
Damu here. I have another different question
Sure.
related to a measure versus a calculated column inside a table.
Okay, sure. What you got?
So I got a fact table, and I have a lookup table that looks up a value for a particular dimension.
Okay.
If I have a measure, and if I do the measure with the min value, and then the fact is connected to the dimension like one to many, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And if I have a min value, I'm going to return only one value, the related value from the table, but it doesn't work correctly. It brings back the entire min value. Whereas if I do a calculated column inside the table, in the fact table, looking up that value, it works fine.
So let me see
Have
if we
you?
can recreate the problem here. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. So you're saying you're trying to add a calculated column to a dimension table or to a fact table?
To the fact table.
To the
It
fact.
works fine. Yeah. So if I do, like from here, if I look up a particular quarter and then add a calculated column related from
Yeah, sure.
your dimension, it works good.
So before we get into Brian's response, because some people, we kind of set the end time for 8:30, which is what it is now. What I'd like to do is, for those who want to stay around for extended Q&A, that's great. And for those who can't stay beyond, I want to take a moment to thank Brian very much and to thank everyone for making it to our first meeting of the year. So awesome presentation, Brian, and thanks so much everyone for coming tonight. And for those who want to stick around and pick Brian's brain, feel free to stay. We don't need to leave until Brian till Brian's dogs need more treats.
Basically, yeah.
Right.
They get to decide. They're the deciders.
But thanks. Have a great night, and we'll see you at a future meeting. And then I'm turning things back over to Brian. Thank you.
Thanks very much, folks. For folks got to drop, I really appreciate you joining me. This has been a lot of fun. I've been working on this for a while. I hope you enjoyed it. I did too. You guys have been a great audience. And I'll stick around for a minute to answer the question that was just asked, and a couple others if we have time for it. So, thank you. Oh, check out my Elements of DAX series on YouTube. I'm supposed to plug that. If you like my presentational style, I got this big, long series. It's fantastic. We got new chapters coming out. So go check it out.
Yeah, the Elements of DAX, awesome series. Oh my God,
cool.
It's got tons of information that I'm,
yeah, and we got
watching all over again and again.
Oh, good. New chapters. I said I was going to have new chapters, I think, out in August. That was optimistic. We've got new stuff coming out. If it's not out this week, I'm pretty sure it's getting pushed out next week. So keep an eye out for it.
Sure.
Okay, so hey, DAX stuff. So we use the related function. and we go get related, I don't know, year or something.
Right.
And that works just fine, right? No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so the issue is when you try and do the same thing in the quarter table, or
In the fact table, like do a measure, basically looking up one of those values from the dimension. You know, using a min function, to get the related value.
Yeah, so let's see. So doing this kind of thing, but doing it inside of a function, is that, or inside of a measure?
Measure,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, okay. So here's how it can work. So if I do, see if I can draw this in such a way that makes sense. I'm going to go pull up my tables just so we could have a visual aid while we're doing this. Oh gosh, where'd it go? Yeah, this will work. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff so we can focus. Go away, come on. Okay, so there's our tables there, right? So if we want to do related, let's start by just getting, I don't know, I'm not really sure what I'm going to call it. So we're looking for, so if you try and use related and like dim quarter, year, is that kind of what you're trying to do? Like what would be
in any value, basically, like maybe even a quarter.
Okay, so here's what's going on, right? And this is getting into the difference between row context and filter context, which is a bit more advanced. I'd love to get into right now. When I am adding a calculated column, right? How shall I phrase this? So a
You're at the row context.
Right. So with a calculated column, I'm essentially behind the scenes, I'm using an add columns function to add a temporary column to a table and then make it permanent, right? So for every single row I add that calculation. When I go into that calculation, there's two contexts. There's the filter context, which filters are in place, and the row context, which row am I in, right? So if I'm adding a column to a table, the row context has stuff in it because for every single row, there's a row that I am in, a row context, right? When I'm doing that same thing in a measure, the measure starts out with an empty row context because I'm not adding a column to a table. I don't know where I'm going to add this thing to. So I can't directly reference
a column name there.
Right,
yeah, you need to have an aggregate function, one of those aggregate functions.
Exactly, yes.
Right.
So go ahead.
Yeah, let's try the aggregate function. Maybe like call it min from there.
We'll just do min. Start with something easy. Yep.
Yeah, we could do the min quarter. From the,
sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the number because it'll actually an answer, right? It's not a very good name for a measure. Okay, so I throw this out here. Boy, that's not what I wanted. Go away. So I throw this out here. And I turn it into a measure, and I get 1, because that's the lowest quarter that's visible. Because there's no filters are in place, so this very first quarter that it could find is 1. But I'm guessing that's not, you probably got that far on your own. What are you trying to do where you got tripped up?
So when when you are in a different quarter, like let's say you have a filter on the fact table.
Filter on the fact table. Oh, I see. Okay, so let's do let's take, not a normal thing to do for a filter, but let's just do this.
Right.
So I'm going to filter by some number on the fact table.
On the fact table. Yeah, let's do like 6,000 or 2,000. Maybe do 6,000. Yeah, 4,000.
Okay. Yep. Great. Okay. So I filter down. Yeah.
Now we should get the minimum value of the which has the 4,000 in it. The minimum value between those functions, the quarters, right?
So
on the quarter table, on the dimension.
Yeah. So here's why you don't. Okay. Good thinking. Nice approach. Here's why it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you know this part. It's the direction of the filter, right? So since it's a one-to-many relationship, and you got a little arrow that way going from quarters to sales, any filter on quarters will affect sales, but filters on sales will not in turn affect quarters. Okay.
Right.
So that part's okay. How do you get around it? Is that the next question?
Yes.
Okay, sure. I'll show you. This one's fun because it's almost mean. Not almost. This one's mean. Okay, so I go calculate min, and then what do? Oh my God, this is going to be wild. My argument is the sales table.
Right.
Right? And so now the minimum quarter with 4,000 is quarter 12, because I guess that's the only one that has those 4,000 in sales.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's from your expression, it sounds like you've seen this approach before.
Right. But but I didn't filter that based on the sales. So that's why I'm getting the min for the entire thing rather than.
Well, so this is the min just for the one I have selected. So if you'll notice that I select different ones, it'll change, right?
Right.
But I don't think I solved your question.
No, I think this solves the question.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, fabulous.
Thank you.
There's several great blog posts on this. So Jeffrey Wang, I think it's one of my favorite DAX blog posts ever. It's called The Magic of Many-to-Many Relationships, I believe. I read this thing like 100 times when I was getting started in DAX, and it was all about this problem, and it kind of blew my mind how it works. Now, I don't know if you need to know it at this point. At this point, you could just use the fact table as an argument and calculate. It has to do with when you use a table, all of the related columns actually sort of come along for the ride. It does this big left outer join. So when I say sales, not only am I getting the columns for sales, amount, and quarter, this actually returns some expanded columns for quarter and year, which will then act as filters. So anyways, if you're curious about that,
okay.
That's
interesting.
I think Magic of Many-to-Many filter, something like that. It's really good blog post. That's fabulous.
From Jeffrey Wang?
Jeffrey Wang, yeah.
Okay.
And
I'll take a look at it.
Rob Colley's got a good one on it. I'm pretty sure SQL BI folks have a good one on it. I mean, it's a fun one, explaining how it works. Using it's easy. Understanding it's a little bit trickier.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome.
Happy to do it. Anybody else? My dogs have they've probably destroyed my kitchen, so we can keep going. It's not matter. It's gone now.
And if you have a table which has, like in yours, you have the quarters, right? Whereas if you have a month with a specific date where you get the data for, and you just have only those dates, would that also work in this particular scenario? I mean, not in this scenario, but in your example where
the examples right here,
rolling your own data, for date table.
In practice, you wouldn't want to use a dim quarter table. You'd use a dim date table, which has one row per date, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The only downside is I can't squeeze all of it onto a small image like this. Otherwise, the logic is the same. The other part of the logic that is the same is when you have that dim dates table, your quarters are going to have this incrementing number, right? Where for every single quarter, there's a number associated with it. If you go up one, you get to the next quarter. If you go down one, you get the previous quarter. Your months are also going to want to have that same incrementing concept. So if you, If you go up a month, you go up by one. If you go down, you go down one. You even want to do the same thing for weeks. If you have things like, rolling 52-week calculations, things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then you don't reset it after the year, right? I mean, if you have multiple years in that, you don't reset your the numbers.
It needs to not reset because these numbers have to be unique and incrementing, right?
Right. Okay, got it.
So let me show you. Let me go pull out a real easy way to do this. So if there's other questions, people could just jump in. But
sorry, I'm hogging all your questions.
No, not at all. But like this is, I could talk about this for hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get the mid. I'm going to steal that. I'm pointing at something you guys can't see. I want to get that quarter number as a number right there, not as text. So I'm going to get the mid. So I want to go start at, oh wait, I have to use the, so quarter as number. I have to go get the mid function. So there's the text that I want. I want to go get position 2 and I want to get 1 character. And I blew it. What did I do wrong? Oh, not quarter number. There we go.
Quarter.
There we go. Hey, that works a little better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to add 0 to convert these to numbers. Okay, good. So getting these incrementing numbers, Getting them to look like this is a little trickier, where it starts at 1 and it goes up. But here's an easy way to sort of solve that same problem. Let me add another calculator column. I'm going to call this quarter number alt. And this same logic works for years. You don't need to do it for years. Years are already done. It works for quarters and it works for months. And it's pretty easy to remember, right? So what do? We're going to take the number of years and we're going to multiply it by 4. Why? Because there's 4 quarters in a year. And then what are we going to do? We're going to add the quarter number.
Quarter number.
Right.
Yeah.
Now we'll get sort of a weird looking thing, 8065, 8066, 8067, 8068. What this really is it's the number of quarters since January 1st of 0 AD, right? You don't really need to know that. What you need to know is this is an easy way of getting one. This is going to go
Unique
up by
number.
1 every single quarter, right?
Yeah, unique ID basically.
It's a unique ID that increments. That incrementing part
yeah.
is. So here, the one that doesn't work that I've seen before is this guy here. So 2016 Q1, 2016 Q2, 2016 Q3, 2016 Q4. This one's actually easier to look at because I can look at the number and go, okay, there's the year part, there's the quarter part. I often see this with months. The downside is it doesn't increment, right? So if I'm on this quarter right here, I can't subtract 1 from that.
Go on from there.
Yeah, back there. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.